Money doesn't fix relationships, doesn't fix anything in your personal life. Money can't buy you a relationship. Money can't buy you happiness. Everybody doesn't get what they want all the time. That's not the way the world works. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. My grandmother helped raise me. And she was very, very, very encouraging. And she really was the one who told me that you could do anything you want in the world. You know, when I think about it, makes me so sad that she's gone, but at the same time, it was just amazing with her. And then my mother built on that with me.
I can see the emotion on your face. She must have meant a lot to you.
She was a good lady. She taught me to be proud. The memory lives on.
If I could ask you that question, what would you want to be known for?
That's a good question. What would I want to be known for? I guess.
Alan?
Yes.
Gabay, thank you for coming by. You have done some incredible work in the real estate industry as a salesperson. I've read that this, real estate wasn't your start, but
Correct.
You transitioned into it. And I wanted to, the one thing I'm really fascinated about in successful people is their upbringing and their earliest context of their childhood. And I think that sometimes that is how they become successful. And for you, what could you describe as your childhood?
Interesting. I grew up in a very, in a family that was very encouraging to me, to whatever you wanted to do, they stood behind you. I had parents who worked, parents who were very supportive of what I did, no matter however that changed. They always wanted you to do the best you could do and to be successful at whatever made you happy. And that just not to my parents, but also back to my grandparents. So, that also made you feel good about whatever you wanted to do. And I enjoyed that. So, and I was always interested in the arts. So early on in my life, it was, and still into today, I was very, very art encouraged. I went to art school. I graduated through NYU into film school, and I studied art for a long time. My first career actually was opening up a design studio. I had a greeting card company, which I designed everything. Then we started making licensing artwork for cards and greeting cards and giftware. And that's how I got into, had nothing to do with real estate at the time at all. It was really just about learning to do sales and marketing.
So you said that success was something that they encouraged to
Well, they didn't encourage success. They encouraged me to follow my dream whatever made me happy.
Mm-hmm.
It was what they wanted you to do.
Yeah.
Find your happiness wherever that was.
Mm-hmm.
So my happiness was in the arts. And, so I kept looking for it. And then this opportunity came up for me I was doing photography, made some greeting cards, did some stuff for some fun for friends, made some fun little greeting cards with photography that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody liked it, wanted me to design a line of cards. I did it. They really liked it. Why don't you open up a greeting card company? Now, this was all back in the 70s when it was easy to start a business for a couple of $1,000s. It's not like today, It was like, this was all back in the mid 70s,
mm-hmm.
When my hair was still brown. And, and it was a whole different story. But I did that, it was across the street on Union Square, across the street from Warhol's factory.
Mm-hmm.
I hung out back then with Warhol and Basquiat, and that was all, everything was, Max's Kansas City was there. It was that whole art scene, hanging out at the factory and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, it was an easier, simpler life, but I created all that stuff. It was really enjoyable, sold it off to somebody because I got, just it was time to, at 30, it was time to sell it and go on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But I always realized that I really liked the sales and marketing component that went along with the creative side, and always took that creative side and followed wherever it took me. And I never really looked for jobs after that. Jobs just came to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's because I was really confident in my ability to be able to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to look through it. Everything, everything's not always black and white. Sometimes there's a gray area, no matter what you're doing. And I was able to figure out how to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
What's the way to move? And I would go to trade shows with the greeting cards, work with buyers, work with department stores. I was very comfortable in speaking to people. And so, I didn't realize at the time that a lot of these people were looking at me for somebody that they could hire. And I ended up being hired by an infomercial company to help them market their products, which was very surprising because I was like, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like, well, you know how to design packaging. You did greeting cards, you could design packaging. You knew how to, talk to people. You know how to talk to buyers of department stores. We saw you in the booth. It was like I was being shopped at my booth at these trade shows, which I really didn't realize that was happening to me. And I was like, it was a whole different world. I was always just being me.
Mm.
And I've never changed. I was just me.
Yeah.
And, and it kept just evolving from this, this kid who grew up in the Bronx, born in the Bronx, grew up in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And here I was all of a sudden, working for an infomercial company and selling all these crazy little widgets on TV when it was these half-hour infomercial shows, which then moved me into, working for them in-house. And from that, all of a sudden, I got a call one day from somebody who was starting cable networks. They were starting Lifetime TV. It was Disney. They were starting at Lifetime. They wanted somebody to help them with their infomercial. It was when the overnights were not running 24/7. And they wanted someone to help them with their infomercial time and creating programming that looked like infomercials. And the next thing I knew, I was working with Disney, working with Lifetime Television, and then ESPN and A&E. And, all of a sudden I was in the TV world. And I was like, how did this happen? Next thing I knew, I was working over Lifetime. Disney was in business with Hearst magazines. Next thing I knew, I was working at Smart Money magazine with their brand development division. How else can I help them take their brand? And next thing I knew, I'm doing brand development and strategic business marketing. And I was like, it just kept thinking because I'm just still being me, thinking out of the box, doing what I do, which is like coming up with ideas, always like fresh ideas. And I can always just have a clarity and just always come up with ways to solve problems. Mm-hmm. And this all came out of my childhood, which it was like, just, think of things. I just was always a problem solver. Mm-hmm. And that then led me to come down into real estate. I never thought I would be in real estate. But one day I, decided, well, I bought an apartment down here, bought 2 or 3 apartments down here before the recession. Came down, I decided to take off a year and just, come down and live on the beach. Then the recession hit. And all of a sudden, it was crazy. Mm-hmm. And I had a friend who worked for a company up in New York called Cerberus. And they were a financial company, and they had a bridge loan for one of the properties down here. And they said, they were looking for somebody to help them with some of the problems they had. And they're like, we know a guy who knows how to solve problems and knows how to talk to people. I had no idea. I knew nothing about real estate, but I knew how to talk to people. And, and I wore a suit. And the next thing I knew, I got an interview, and they called me up and they're like, can you help us sell this project? And it was up in Aventura called Peninsula 2. And I was like, okay. I met with these people and they're like, you know what? You know how to talk to people. You know how to, you seem to be able to go across the board selling all these different types of product, but you have the same skill set, which is you know how to talk to people, you know how to solve problems. So why don't you do that? Next thing I know, I'm in real estate. And here I am 20 years later. Now I've been keep getting headhunted to different companies. And I love working with Sirhan. I found my business associate, Matt Van Wee, and here we are doing this. Did I ever think I'd be here at this point in my life? No. But I never went looking for these jobs. They just found me all the time.
Yeah.
And so here I am.
And I think one of the interesting things that you've talked about is that how important listening was to you and how that kind of was taught to you at a very young age. And I think in terms of being a people's person and it sounds like a salesperson, you have to be very good at listening to what they need and what problems you could be able to solve for them. Because I think only being a people's person is half of that. But I think listening and actively listening to what that person might need is just as important.
Yes.
And what age was that taught to you?
It was just always there. Like I grew up with, don't interrupt, I mean, not that I was getting yelled at as a kid, but you learn lessons. Mm-hmm. Like there were times that, my parents would say something like, if I didn't know something or I did something wrong, and it wasn't like I was getting yelled at for doing something wrong, but here's why you can't do this. Here's why you can't cross the street. Here's why when this car's coming, or there's a red light as opposed to a green light. Like, I wasn't being yelled at for doing something wrong if I did something wrong. I was being told why it was wrong. It wasn't screaming and yelling. It wasn't, it wasn't wrong what I was doing. I was being told why it was, not the right time. Mm-hmm. It wasn't discipline. So it was just, just being taught a lesson.
Yeah.
And I've always taken that with me because you realize in life, you have to listen to people, especially in business. Everybody has their own point of view in business. And sometimes you need to listen to what somebody is saying to understand what they're trying to get across. Because a lot of times people get frustrated with the situation and they don't always explain it the right way, what they're saying. And especially when it's coming through text. Like I've always said, don't listen to what somebody says through a text. Sometimes people get angry and they text it the wrong way, or through an email, like, they're frustrated at something and they might not really be saying it. So you got to talk to them and you got to let somebody finish what they're saying. Don't interrupt them. Let them just say it. And then you go back and you're like, okay, let me try to understand what's the frustration, what's getting them angry. Why are they upset? And is it just like a knee-jerk reaction because they didn't get what they wanted? Like, what is it? Because sometimes people just get frustrated for the wrong reason, just like I'll get frustrated at a client for the wrong reason. Mm-hmm. But, am I going to tell them it? Or, I will never put something in a text that will be frustrating because it goes out there and you can't take it back. Mm-hmm. And yes, sometimes I'll do something like that by error. But then right away, I will call and say, listen, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that. You have to know when to apologize and be wrong. Mm-hmm. But I will always try to let them finish what they have to say and then go back to them and, try to break it apart point by point and what they have to say. But listening is very, very important. And because when you listen, you can understand, let them vent. Because our job as being salespeople is to let the client vent what they have to say, try to understand why they're upset, and then try to, work it through with them so that they're happy. Because ultimately we work for them. They don't work for us.
Yeah. Now, in terms of, you talked about confidence, about going out and being happy. Do you think that it was, you were able to do that because of the assurance that you got so early on, that if there's something that you were happy about or something that you wanted to do in your life, that was kind of like the pat on the back in terms of anything that you want to do, you can do it? Do you think that was some of the reassurance that you got, which made you confident?
Yes, because listen, I grew up in a family that made me feel confident about what I did, and if something was wrong, there was a discussion about why this was wrong, or if I did something and I didn't get the result I wanted, and I would be upset about it. There'd be a discussion as to why I didn't get what I wanted. Because listen, you're a kid sometimes. You think everything, I didn't get this, or I didn't get the toy I wanted, or, I didn't get into this club I wanted, or whatever it was as a kid. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes you just can't get what you want. Sometimes the world doesn't work out that way. Stuff doesn't happen sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to realize that, you can't always get what you want. Like that's the way the world is.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to realize that, you don't always win. And that's just what's going to happen to you no matter what. Everybody doesn't get what they want all the time. That's not the way the world works. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to realize that, that's just how life is. And, in relationships, in friendships, in job interviews, like you don't always get it. And, you have to learn that there are disappointments out there. And, no matter whether you like it or not, that happens to you. And you have to learn how to just suck it up and take it, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way the world works. And you can't be upset at yourself. You have to try to say, well, okay, how come I didn't get it? And sometimes it's not you. Sometimes somebody else is just a better person for that job, mm-hmm. or more qualified than you are, or it just wasn't your time, or, maybe you screwed up the interview. Sometimes, people have an off day, so you try to say, okay, what did I do that I could have done better? Or, you know what? That other person was just a better fit for that job than I was. Mm-hmm. Or they had a better connection. Or they knew somebody, sometimes somebody else just knows somebody that, was better at it. You can't always beat yourself up for something. You just got to move on and, try again or go someplace else.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, I want to transition a little bit. One of the things that I've seen, you're in luxury retail, not luxury retail, luxury sales. Yeah. And one of the things that I always wonder about is money fixing problems or fixing issues. And sometimes people want to go into business and create a business, and they want to be able to get a lot of money. What is I guess in terms of what is something that you thought money would fix that it didn't?
Let's see. Well, I can tell you, money doesn't fix relationships. That's for sure. Doesn't fix personal, anything in your personal life. Mm-hmm. What does money fix? Money can buy you clothes. Money can buy you an apartment. Money can buy you trips. Money can't buy you a relationship. Money can't buy you happiness. I mean, what is happiness? Objects? Money can buy you all the objects you want. Money can't buy you happiness. Because, that's really, the one thing I think you can't buy with happiness. Money can't buy you, ultimately health and happiness. Mm-hmm. There are certain things that, just, I guess, to me, I guess that's the most important thing is that, money will never buy you, a partner in life that you can be happy with.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything else, I guess.
Yeah.
You can get all the clothes and jewelry and, Fortunately, I have good hair, so I don't have to worry about that. No hair transplants for me.
Was there an age or a moment that you realized that?
Yeah. Let me see. Probably back in my, I guess it was, when was that? I was probably back in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in a relationship that, was there, it was just when I realized it was based on money and not me.
Mm.
And I was like, no, this isn't gonna work. Oh yeah. We'll have babies and everything will be wonderful. And I was like, no, babies isn't gonna make this work. I don't want to have children with you. I don't want to have babies with you. It's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, like, moving forward, it was just like, it's, I don't need somebody for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized as I kept getting more successful, there were more people who just wanted to cling for money. And I guess that's because I have a tremendous amount of friends that I've had even since before kindergarten. And I still have these friends today. And I just saw them yesterday. I was with a bunch of them yesterday that I've had for, ever since grade school. And we just all hang out and have a great time together. And like, we're all just like fetching. We're getting older and this and that and, whatever we're talking about. But it's like, we just hang. And it's just like fun to hang. And, we're all at different, financial backgrounds and stuff, but it doesn't matter because we don't care. We just have a good time together. And we realized that, we didn't come to each other for money. Mm-hmm. We just come to each other because we like each other. And I realized that, as you get more successful, you find that people are trying to attach themselves to you because they want to be taken care of financially. And that's been my biggest problem is finding, is that for me personally, is that people want that. And I have so many friends that, that I don't have that issue with. But that's been the one downside in my life, I guess, more than anything else is for me anyway, is that people are just trying to, latch on to me to take care of me, take care of them.
Yeah, that's, I always wonder about that too, because by no means do I consider myself any bit of successful just yet. But I think that's one of the things that I worry. I don't want to say worry about, but that's one of the things that I definitely wonder about is that navigation between people wanting to be around you because of who you are instead of the monetary gain that they can gain from you or what they can be able to benefit from you. And I think it's interesting to hear and to see not only has money brought you these revelations, but also the going through life and I guess some would say maybe making mistakes or having certain situations that have happened that kind of make you reflect and change your perspective in a way.
Yeah.
Has there been any struggle between the ambition that you have and anything being enough? Because I think that there's a certain point when we are so ambitious that we want more and we continuously want more. And then when's the cap? Like when is the point that we're satisfied or content with where we're at? Has that ever been a struggle for you?
No, not really. Because I really enjoy what I do. Because what I do is, it's not just about financial rewards. What I really do is I enjoy helping people attain their goals. I don't just do what I'm doing now to make money. I mean, it's nice. Let's not get it wrong, But I also am really pleased when I see how much somebody is grateful for helping them get what they need. Mm-hmm. And when somebody just thanks me, whether it's the buyer side or the seller side, when they're just so happy when the deal is done. And I like working with a lot of young people who get their first apartment. Maybe they're in a rental and then they move to their first apartment, and I see them starting off and they're just so grateful for what they got. And it just really, really makes me really happy. And that gives me so much joy. And it really is what it's all about right now. Because do I have to work now? No. But do I like it? Yes. It really just makes me happy. And I see no reason to ever have to stop doing it because it brings me joy.
Why does it bring you so much happiness and joy?
Because I'm helping people. It really does. It's really about helping people. And this is a career where it's still helping people, whether it's somebody who's, moving out of, it's a boomer who's selling a house and moving into their next stage of life, wherever that's going to be. Or it's a family that is having more babies and needing to move. I mean, whatever the stage of life is, it's moving to that next stage. And it's just, really, it's helping. It's helping somebody move into something else, and I always like that because I find that there's always something going on with somebody, whether they're having financial issues and they have to move to do something. Like there's always a reason somebody is moving, whether it's for moving up or moving down for something. But they always need some type of help for whatever they're doing. And they come looking for help. And this is my way of giving back. And I always feel, it's very comforting and I like it.
I can see that just because I know that just in that one interview that you had with David, that's where I found you. I could just see the youthful energy in you and the way that you spoke and the way that you approach life and your perspective on life. And I think it's to see somebody who has so much success and so much whatever that might be to you or to anybody else. I think that that's a good perspective for anybody to truthfully have, especially as they get older or things happen in their life. It seems that you've always been a person that has been able to see the glass half full instead of half empty. Is that something that you gained over time?
I've always had that perspective on life, but I was always raised that way. I've always been very optimistic, not pessimistic. But that's just, how my family was. I always came from a very joyful and happy. I came from a very large family with a tremendous amount of uncles and aunts and cousins. And, it was just a very joyful upbringing as a kid. And everybody was just happy and laughing and fun. And there was a lot of successful people, not successful people. But when they all came together, it was just one big happy family that had a good time. And everybody, whether people were, successful and not successful, we didn't know that as kids. We didn't know. But we just knew that they all loved to be together and have a good time. And everybody was always happy. And we just saw it that way. And we were always raised that way. So, nobody was ever pessimistic growing up. So, I didn't know anything any different. And we were always raised to, do the best you can do. Be the happiest you could be. Do it, follow your joy wherever it takes you. And that's what we did. And I'm still doing it now. Even though my hair turned gray, I still have it. So that's all that counts.
Yes.
And, I'm just happy. Most times I'm happy. This last week was a little difficult, but, we'll move past that onto the next one, and keep going because, we all have good weeks and bad weeks, but you got to move on. Life is like that, throws you a curveball and then, you move on.
What's been the hardest part about your journey?
The hardest part? I guess the hardest part is that sometimes you have to deal with people that are difficult to work with. And you got to figure out how to navigate around them because you have to work with them. And sometimes that's not as easy as you'd like it to be. And you have to understand, especially in this industry, but in all industries, there's always people that are easier to work with and people that are more difficult to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But you gotta figure out how to do that and how to make it easy and simple. And sometimes you just gotta bite your tongue and just make it as pleasant as possible, because ultimately everything moves on. Who you're working with today might not be who you're working with tomorrow or next year. So that's, being in sales, and this is an industry where we're not behind a computer. I'm not doing data entry. We're out in the front line dealing with people all day long. And we have to understand how to read somebody quick and fast, but the people we report to are in the back. So, we have to counter all that back and forth. And we find out a lot of times that, it's difficult with both sides, because, for instance, we're in sales, people in the front, the buyer wants the cheapest price possible. The seller wants the highest price possible. So you got to fight them back and forth. And then you have the broker behind us who is saying one thing. So we got three different people that we're trying to deal with all at the same time. So, and you have to, figure out how to navigate that. But, all of those people change. So, no matter how you do it, you're always not with the same brokerage firm. It's not that type of industry. And the buyers will change. The brokers will change, because that's listings. Those all change. And then the brokerage you're working with, you're never with the same brokerage firm your whole life. It's just not the way this goes. But, you just learn to, figure out the right way to work with all these people. And, just, try to keep a cool head on. Mm-hmm. And do the best you can with it. And sometimes, like it or not, you lose your temper. And then you have to, as they say, eat crow, apologize, and move on.
Yeah. It seems that emotional intelligence is a very big thing that you need to have in order to be a good real estate agent. Would you say that that's something that's having emotional intelligence is something that you need to have?
Yes. I was. Yeah. Say very much so. But, you just really. But listen, no matter what it is, there are times we're all just human. Mm-hmm. And there are times you just blow up and you have no choice about it, because you get to a boiling point sometimes, and people just can hit that one little chord and you just blow up. And then you're like, oh God, what did I do? You just know how to hit that one piece, and you're like, I should not have said that.
Yeah.
And you're sorry, and you can go back and you can apologize, and vice versa. Somebody can say it to you. I've had clients say it to me. I've had buyers and brokers blow up at me. I've had my people I report to blow up at me. And then, but you're human. You can apologize. The worst thing is when somebody doesn't apologize, just for being human. At some point in time, everybody screws up. Everybody loses control, which everyone gets emotional, for the wrong reason. But, we're just human. We all screw up at times. We all, lose our cool. But we're human. That happens.
That's a very interesting point. Is there anything that you've learned within yourself, within helping other people?
Well, it's like what I just said, I guess, is that, there will be a time that, I've learned many times, like, I will lose control. I will screw up. I will yell at somebody. I have yelled at clients, whether it's a buyer or a seller, because they have just incessantly said something. And I just was like, oh God, it's like, I just want to go like, shut the F up, you know. Can I say fuck? No, I shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, you can.
You'll bleep it out.
No, there's no filter over here.
I know, but it's like, you just like, you get to the point where they just scream at you about something. And there are clients who will not, but sometimes you just get somebody who will just say something, and it gets to that one point and you just lose control. You know, especially me, because I'm a New Yorker, you know, and I will just get to the point and I'm just like, shut the fuck up, you know, or I won't say, but I'll say something like, the anger will just pour out of me. And I don't get angry much, but, you know, when I do, and then I'm just like, I just lose it. And then I will just, you know, and I'll hear it coming, and I can't control it, because you finally just got me on the breaking point. You know, and I don't really lose control much, but when I get there, and then I'm just like, oh God, and I have to apologize right away, and I'm really sorry, but I did it. You can't take it back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I said, you just made me crazy. Because, you know, I will try to like say it like, but just let me say it, you know, but, and they keep interrupting me, and I'll just go scream. Will you just shut up? You know, and I finally just said this the other day to this woman I report to on a project. I just finally just lost it and screamed at her, you know. And then I got fired from the project, and then got hired back again like 10 minutes later. And I was just like, you know, because I was right, but I was just like, enough already, you know. And the problem is like, sometimes you just lose it. Like, you know, we're just human. And it's just like, when they don't let you talk, or, you know, but, you know, the bottom line is that, you know, you try to cap it, but if you do get to that point and something happens, even if it's not your fault, apologize anyway. Because, you know, listen, in our industry, we're all just independent contractors. You know, you can be fired in a minute. There's no HR. You know, you can be fired. You know, what are they going to do? You know, we're not employees of a company. You know, we're not salaried people. You can go work for somebody else tomorrow. But the real thing is just, you know, if it happens, and it does, just apologize, because that's just the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do, is to apologize to somebody for it. You know, you know, again, I keep saying the same thing. We're just human.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're going to screw up at times, and somebody's going to scream at you, and you really want to yell back at them. But just internalize it. Just sit there and I like, when somebody yells at me and stuff, I just sit in my mind. In my mind, I'm going, this guy's a fucking asshole. You know, but you just let it sit in, let him finish. And then I'm like, are you done? And then I'll calmly try to explain why they're wrong or what they said. But you don't have to start having a screaming fight back and forth. But sometimes you just lose it. I mean, you have no control over it.
Yeah. In your even in a situation where you want to yell back, you still follow the same principles of letting them finish.
Yeah.
And not speaking over them.
Yes. In most times.
Most times.
It depends what they're yelling at me for.
Yeah.
You know, because if they're saying the same thing 4 times in a row, I'll just like lose it. But it's very rare that I would do that. But it has happened. But not much. Mostly not in business, mostly in my personal life and personal relationships. You know, that'll happen, not in business.
Yeah. How has navigating personal relationships been in the line of work that you do?
It's really not a problem. They don't really cross over that much.
Yeah.
Except when, you know, you have to like, you're in the middle of something and you got to go run and stop it and run and do a showing or something, and, you know, which happens sometimes. You know, last minute something you have to do and run and do it. But I try to like schedule. I try not to do, you know, I'm done, you know, by 7 o'clock at night. I'm done. I don't have to work at night. You don't have to, you know, I don't have to answer phone calls for people after 7 o'clock at night, you know, unless they're really in a different time zone or something.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing I have to do after 7 o'clock at night that I can't do at, you know, after 7 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can have personal time for stuff.
Yeah.
But you have to be on all day long because you never know when people are calling you, what they're doing, what you need to do for somebody. Just like I did when I got, just when I started this.
Yeah.
I had to go have that showing, and I'll keep looking because I know that this guy wants this apartment and I know what's going on with it.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't called me back, so I know he probably likes it. But, you just don't know. I mean, here it is. What time is it? It's 11 o'clock, so I know that, he's seen it, even though the guy was 10 minutes late.
Yeah. What do you think makes a good real estate agent or salesperson?
Everybody has their own methodology on how they do sales and their own way of talking to people. But you really have to be focused on, you have to be knowledgeable. You have to be attentive. But you also have to understand your client, whether you're working with the buyer or you're working with the seller. But you got to know what they want. You have to talk to them in their language that they want to be spoken to. But if you're working, but either way, if you're working with a buyer, you got to know how to talk to them. What do they want to know about this property before you set it up? What are they looking for? What's their most important? What are the bullet points they need to know before you show it to them? And if it's a seller, you got to know exactly what type of offer to bring them. You don't want to bring them something if it's a really low ball offer. You got to know that they're going to throw it out anyway. Mm. So it's really just understanding the dynamics of the person you're working with, and working, no matter, you can talk to Matt, you can talk to anybody in this business. It's the broker to broker communication that really gets things done. Mm-hmm. Because the buyer and the seller, it's their deals, but the broker to broker communication is really what is necessary to make sure the deal gets done at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Because they're the ones who are talking to each other. And they're the ones talking to their clients. Because we can't tell each other's, what our clients want. But we can help to navigate the deal to make sure that we're each looking after our interests of our clients and bringing them what the client will ultimately accept in a deal.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a crazy client story? Like, do you have one that might be your favorite, or the one that's like, that you look back on and like, damn, that was just that was a lot?
I don't know. So many. What clients are, oh God, I'm trying to think if I have a crazy client story. There was this one story. I'm trying to think of the one. I have this picture. Okay. I did this once before. I have to find the picture on my Instagram now. I was selling this apartment. Mm-hmm. Thought the place was empty. Brought in a client, the family, looking at this thing. Didn't know what was going on. Went into the bedroom. Opened up the door. This was in the bedroom.
Oh man. And you could see that.
You could see this.
Yeah.
She was in her bed like this.
So how did you navigate that? How did you solve that problem?
Closed the door right away, going, what the heck is this? And I can send you this picture if you need to drop it into the photo. Because she was giving herself a mask. She knew that we were coming.
So she already knew prior.
Totally forgot.
Yeah.
And, this was going on. And I was like, it was just, because usually, I make sure in advance that the places are all clean, everything's done. It's not like there was some story with, people having sex in an apartment or anything, because I make sure, like, I'm too professional for all that.
Yeah.
So that's my craziest story, was just that one, because, that's the only one. Nothing else that was too crazy.
Did you end up selling it? The home?
Yeah, we did. I mean, they liked the apartment, but we came back to see it again. Of course, she jumped up, you know, took it off, washed her face, came outside with, put on her bathrobe. I'm so sorry. I forgot all about it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they didn't really care. They came in and they were just laughing. They were just cracking up. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's doing a facial, And obviously the woman who was there with her husband, she knew what this thing was, and they started more talking about how effective it was. Did it work? Did it not work? So, we turned it into a whole nother story. But I was just like, I told her we were coming. I told her that morning. And she just
Just
was
forgot.
clueless and didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
But, I don't have any story like walking in with people having sex in the bathroom or anything like that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not that story.
No, it's okay. I mean, that's crazy enough. But it's also good to know that that you care about your work deeply, so none of that stuff would happen.
No.
Very professional.
I double, triple check, and stuff like that to make sure that they're empty and everything's done in advance. But yes, that's about the craziest it is, because I'm too anal to make sure that everything is perfect and done in advance like that.
How has social media been impacting your work in terms of how has it been able to improve not only your platform but the amount of sales that you get?
Social media, what it really does, we find out, is that it's more of a branding vehicle when we're looking to do business with somebody. It's more that they look us up to see who we are. It doesn't, like, social media is not bringing them to me. Social media is when they're checking me out. So social media is a mix of properties we're doing and then personality driven of who I am. So, you're seeing both of it because they want to know who I am as a person. So you're seeing my, other stuff I'm doing besides real estate. And then they also want to see my real estate stuff on social media. So they see me as a person, and they see me and working with Matt on our social media stuff. And then they see me and Matt doing other stuff as well. Because I do a lot of my social media with Matt as well. So, so it's a mix of everything because they really just want to know who they're getting and what personality they're going to see when they're there. And they see me, listen, I'm a klutz. They see me falling a lot on social media. Can't help that.
Yeah.
I've always been a klutz. So, but, they see what they're getting, and they see how we work together, single by myself and together as a team. And then, stuff we're doing outside of it.
Do you think it's going to continue to impact the real estate industry?
Very much so. But you see, I don't see social media as, it brings in some clients because people do search online for, people, through social media to look at stuff like Miami agents and stuff. You do see some people coming in through social media, but more so you see people, because you're always networking. I mean, we're always networking outside in the real world. And then when somebody needs you, they will remember you and then look you up through social media. So, I have a lot of followers on social media. And people, when they need you, then they'll come to you. But all the time, myself and Matt too, on the street, they'll be like, "Oh, you're that guy. I follow you." And I forget that people do that. I always forget that. And they follow my dog more than they follow me half the time. I forget that they know my dog because she's in a lot of my posts all the time. They're like, "Oh, that's the dog on social media." She's with that guy in the suit, and I was like, "That's me," because I'm walking the dog. But people do follow it, and I always forget it. And I have to give a shout out to Chandler, who edits all my social media and shoots all that stuff, because they follow it and they know it because of that editing style and what they do with it. So I forget that people actually follow that stuff.
Yeah. And one thing I love about you is that you love to collaborate. You love to
all the time.
You love to collaboration. Not many people in your position would do that. I often see sometimes with people that I've came across that are to the world successful and actually are successful, that they rather not collaborate with other people, and for whatever reason, and that's one thing that really stood out to me, is that how much you love collaborating. Because I would see comments on the post and you'd always say, let's collaborate, let's create content together.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I think that that's an incredible characteristic that you have.
Oh yeah. Listen, I love to do. I have no shame.
Yeah.
It's all fun. I mean, this is fun today. I mean, it's all fun. You never know.
Yeah.
I just, I'm out there doing my thing. I love to talk. I love to, this is just me.
Mm-hmm.
This is me being me.
And in social media, it's very much where people aren't really them.
Yeah.
Has that happened to you, where you've met people that weren't really who they advertise themselves to be?
Oh God, all the time. Oh, Matt's right over there laughing. It's like, you'll have him next. It's like all the time. God almighty. That's so true. People, they have a whole nother persona off camera. With me, what you see is what you get. That's for sure.
I could definitely stand on that. It was a pleasure, even just talking to you, that little conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, and just learning more about you. That to me was very warming to know that you were going to be the same person.
Oh yeah.
I guess in a sense, for other people to kind of gain some sort of understanding how to be successful, whatever that means to them, has there been any habits or anything in your routine that has kind of led to where you are now?
No. I've always just gone with the flow. I mean, my life has gone off into lots of veered in different directions. I never thought I would do real estate. I never thought I would end up where I am today. I didn't plan this at all. I thought I was going to go to, film school. I thought I was going to be an artist. I always thought that was going to be where I was going to end up. But I've always taken a design sensibility, even in where I'm doing now. I have to help people visualize what they can do with a space, because people can't visualize what to do when they see a space. So I even take that ability to help them look at something and say, well, you could take down this wall, or you could do this. I can do that. And I still collect art, and I'm very engaged in the art world still. So I haven't left that, even though I don't create art anymore myself. I still am. I guess I do somewhat, but that's a whole other story, another video. But no, I just have gone where the universe takes me, I guess. Mm-hmm. And this is where I ended up right now. But
why couldn't you see yourself being a real estate agent?
I never had an interest in it. Mm-hmm. I just always, as a kid, I just always, did sculpture. I never painted. I always did photography. I had a little teeny brownie camera, little teeny camera since I was a kid. And that's what I did, in a Polaroid. And I always was photography. And I always just wanted to be a photographer. And that was growing up. I had a little dark room, in the basement. And I was like, just going to be a photographer. That was it, in the laundry room. And, had that in elementary school. And that was all I wanted to do. And just gradually somehow ended up in here. I went to school to be a photographer. That was it. Somehow it just morphed, just kept moving me in directions, because people kept offering me opportunities. I don't know, and now I'm here. I just followed where the universe took me.
Yeah. You followed your dreams and you followed your curiosity, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. It was always a different, because, I won't say I get bored, but it's just like, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. Once I realized I wasn't going to be a photographer as a career, mm-hmm. I still do it with my camera. I still do lots of stuff in it. But, I wasn't going to be a photographer as a career. I said, all right, I just kept moving along with the flow. And I liked everything I was doing. I loved I had a strategic brand marketing company for 20 years. I worked with major brands. I loved it all. You know, Circle Line, I helped rebrand the whole Circle Line about 15 years ago. It was a great thing. I worked out in the North Fork. I worked with the Wine Council up there. I did a whole rebranding of the Wine Council on the North Fork and all the wineries out there. It was great. I loved it. You know, so it was creative. It just wasn't photography.
Yeah.
You know, for 20 years I had people, places, and things. It was a whole creative brand strategy marketing company. So, you know, so it was creative, just wasn't photography. So, you know, kept moving me in different directions, working with restaurants, all type of stuff. So, you know, it just kept moving along. And I loved it. And I had a whole group under me. You know, I worked for, like with Disney, I told you, I ran their synergy group for the East Coast, for the West Coast. So I loved all the synergies that were there. I was the vice president of licensing and merchandising for Lifetime TV. I was the head of brand development for Smart Money magazine. You know, lots of stuff like that. It was all creative stuff, just wasn't photography. So, I mean, and these were just jobs that fell into my lap.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And here I am today.
There's when we spoke on the phone, you talked about the relationship that you've had with your mother, and then I read, after doing some more research, that you had a really good relationship with your grandmother as well.
Oh yeah, those articles that came out. I published a bunch of those.
Could you describe your relationship with them?
Oh yeah. Well, it was I grew up my mother's side of the family was very matriarchal. Because she grew up with it was her mother, and her grandmother in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. So her father died when she was 11. He was sickly. So it was a very, very strong matriarchal family. And then her grandmother died when she was, I guess I was born. I mean, I was like 2 or something. And my grandmother helped raise me. And she was very, very, very encouraging. And she really was the one who told me that you could do anything you want in the world. And she was in the ladies' garment industry. She was the president of the union in her building, or whatever. I mean, I don't, they didn't really talk about it much. But she was very high up in the union there. And she just was she was like, you could do anything you want in the world. She encouraged me to go into the art. She encouraged me to do all this photography that I wanted to do. She saw all of this stuff that I was capable of doing. She took me to all the museums. She took me to galleries all the time. She saw that I had this interest that my brothers didn't have. And she would take me all over the city. I mean, we spent weekends at grandma's all the time when we were back in elementary school. And she just was like so encouraging of the creative side, and let me do it, bought me art supplies and all of this stuff to do. And it was so empowering that she just allowed this and saw it to me. And whenever I went over there, it was always like, like the Lincoln Logs and all this stuff to just let that side of me come out that, my father didn't encourage any of that at all for me. And it was amazing. And it was really, when I think about it, makes me so sad that she's gone. But at the same time, it was just amazing with her. And then my mother built on that with me. And, it was a very, very, very strong ability, because my grandmother was a single parent. My mother was single. It was all just, it was a very, very strong matriarchal side. When women were supposed to stay home and not go to work, that whole side of the family all worked. My great-grandmother divorced her husband back in Poland when she had my grandmother. And my grandmother was an only child. My mother was an only child. And they all grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, and they all worked. So it was a very, very strong family where they had no men there. It was all just women who worked back in a period when they all should have stayed home and had husbands. So it was, really, very different dynamic for that time period. And they were all very, very encouraging for me to go out and study art and do stuff. When everyone else would have said, oh, you're Jewish, you should be a doctor, or you should be a lawyer, or you should be an accountant. And they were all like, no, you could go be an artist, go ahead. And took me to all the older museums and everything. So, and I give them a lot of credit for allowing me to explore that and to let myself do that. So, I give, and like I said, her name was Sally. And, my first cat, my first animal I had was a cat, and I named him Sally. I named her Sally after my grandmother. My first grandchild was named after her. But they were, it was a very, very unusual childhood because you never really had that type of strong matriarchal lineage going back for 3 generations. But I give them all a lot of credit for allowing me to do that.
Yeah, I can see the emotion on your face. She must have meant a lot to you. Do you still miss her to this day?
Yeah, and my mother's dead now too. So they're all gone. So, but the memory lives on.
Yeah. Is there anything that, besides the words of encouragement, is there anything that you miss about them? Any characteristics? Any just the way that they were as people?
No, well, a lot of what they taught me, is in me. So, there's things that, I do. There's certain things that they say and do that I still say and do. Because, it comes through me. So, every once in a while I see myself saying something or doing something and I'm like, oh, that's how grandma did it. So, it just comes up sometimes and I remember it.
Yeah.
And I have a few pictures, not many of them, because, back in those days, there was no video. So nobody did video. There was nothing. There's a couple of old pictures that are lying around, that I have from my bar mitzvah or something. And that's about it. Not a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's in my head.
My mom, I'm very close with my mom as well. And some of the times when she tells me that she's proud of me, that means a lot to me. And I cherish it and value it a lot. What were those words? What did those words mean to you? That they believe in you, that they know that you could be able to do anything. What did those words mean to you? Oh,
they were always important to me. And, when I started, they were both still alive when I started my businesses. And, and they were very, happy, for me. And when I started my card business and my grandmother was still alive in Florida, and I would, she had that same card game with her girlfriends in the Bronx. They all moved to Century Village. They all had that same card game, every Wednesday down there. And I used to send her yellow roses. She loved yellow roses. So every Wednesday I'd send her yellow roses, and I made sure they showed up while she had the card game so she could, show all her girlfriends that I would send her yellow roses. And then she would call me in the office and she would be so proud that and all the girls would be there, and, she just liked to show off. I liked to let her show off that her grandson send her flowers.
Mm-hmm.
She was so happy for her.
Yeah.
She was a good lady. She taught me to be proud.
Yeah.
And to be self-sufficient. That was the most important thing, because she was self-sufficient. Because her husband died when, my mother was 11.
Mm-hmm.
And she died in the early 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. What else you got for me?
I'm sorry to hear that, but are you proud of yourself now?
Oh yeah. I'm always proud of myself. Matt's laughing, but he knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have good days and bad days like we all do.
Yeah.
But yeah. In general, I'm fine. I mean, I still have hair, so I'm proud of that.
Yeah. What do you envision for? I hear that people aren't into buying. or that's like some of the I haven't really thought about buying a house or anything about the market itself. What do you foresee for the future for the real estate market?
Well, Matt and I have this saying. It's very simple. Buyers have to buy, sellers have to sell. It's always going to be there. You know, people will rent. There's always going to be people renting, but there's always going to be people buying. There's always going to be people selling. The market's there's always going to be real estate going on. Right now, people are a little worried because of their, financials going on, and the world is upside down right now. But, it's always cyclical. Real estate has always been a cyclical market, and the cycle is always going to turn again. Q1 was hard for everybody. Q2 will probably still have some uncertainty in it. And then, it'll probably turn around again when when it levels out, and before you know it, there's going to be midterms, and then things will change around again, as it always does every 2 years in this country. So I'm not too worried about it. You just have to buckle up and see what happens in the next few months.
Do you think people should buy? Is buying better
right
than
now,
renting?
Buying, that's what Matt and I are here to do this afternoon with Chandler. Florida is on sale right now. That's our tagline. There's never been a better time than now to buy, in Florida at least. Mm-hmm. Because the prices now are just about the same. Well, we're talking about not the brand new construction. We're talking about the 20-year-old product, which in any other state but Florida would be considered new. But in Florida, it's considered old. And it's never been a better time to buy, because it's almost the same price as it was 20 years ago. And it's an amazing product, and it's really nice, and it's really good. So it happens to be one of the best times to buy right now is in Florida. Mm-hmm. Product, because they keep building and building and building. And everything right now they're building has to be branded. It has to be, every luxury brand is sticking their name on a building these days in Florida. You can't turn around with another Porsche or another Baccarat or another Waldorf Astoria going up. They're everywhere. But 20 years ago, it was just a nice building that's just as good, but it doesn't have a name on it. And that stuff is being discounted like crazy. Mm. And they're just as good and just as nice. And that stuff is on sale through the roof. And there's never been a better time to buy than now. So the answer is yes. If you have the money, this is the time to buy.
Yeah, I hear Miami is a little bit expensive though. Is it as expensive as New York City?
That's why we're saying the stuff that's not expensive is the stuff that's 20 years old. Where you're in New York now, a 20-year-old building, no brainer. In Miami, a 20-year-old building is considered ancient. And it's not. Mm-hmm. But in Miami, it is, because they keep building newer stuff to attract people that are coming down there. They don't want them to buy the 20-year-old building. But in New York, a 20-year-old building is new.
What's the most expensive piece of real estate you sold for?
That what?
What's the most expensive piece of real estate you sold?
That I sold?
Yeah.
I guess it was the $12 million house in the Venetian Island. I sold it for 8, and then 30 months later, I sold it for 12. I resold it. So altogether, $20 million in 30 months.
Oh, wow. I don't even know where that island is.
It's right off, it's the Venetian Causeway. It's these man-made islands right off Miami, between Miami and Miami Beach. Right next to Star Island. Everyone seems to know Star Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I think about a lot is what would I want to be known for? What would my last days, what would I want to provide for the world? If I could ask you that question, what would you want to be known for?
That's a good question. What would I want to be known for? I guess, just that, I was a good person. I mean, I have a lot of friends. I would just think that, I've been good to my friends and that, I really, I'm not an asshole. And I would think that, I would want people to remember just how nice and fun and kind I was to people. And, what else? I mean, what are people going to remember me for? A house I sold somebody, an apartment? Nobody's going to remember that over time. I mean, I have nephews and nieces and stuff. Who's going to know me in 2 generations? Nobody. Nobody's going to know who I am down the line. I'm not going to have, not going to be a page in history anywhere. That's for sure. So the only people who are going to know me are the people from my immediate, this generation, maybe the next generation. It's not going to be a sculpture of me anywhere. There's not a statue of me anywhere. There's not anything. So, so I don't think that, in another, 30 years or 50 years, anybody around, everyone will be dead who will have known me. So the only people that will know me will be the people now and maybe the next generation of people who, cousins and nieces that are born and raised who know me now. And just that, I was nice, I was fun, you had a great time with me, and, goodbye. You got to be honest. I mean, let's be serious, I'm not going to make an impact in the world, but I'll make an impact of people who I know now. And, like I'm just going to Paris now because my cousins just had a bunch of kids, and I'll probably know them for the next, 10, 15 years until I'm gone. And hopefully they'll have remembered me and, through their life.
Is there anything that you regret? Anything that you wish you would have done differently?
I mean, listen, we all say there's things we could have done differently, but, nah, not at this point. What would I do differently? I don't know. I'm here. I'm alive. What would I have done differently? I wish I didn't jump on that bed and break my back. Steve Clare, wherever you are, I wish you would have had a mattress on that bed. That was a few months ago. And I have a video of it. No, yeah, but, you can't go back and change climb.
Mm-hmm.
So,
The last question I have for you is there anything that you would want to tell your mother and your grandmother? Is there any last words or anything that you left unsaid that you'd want to tell them?
Nah, I told them everything. There was never anything I didn't tell them. I was very close to them. I saw them before they died. I was with them. I was with them both when they died. So I was holding their hands when they died.
What was that moment like?
It was sad. Well, they both had, Alzheimer's and dementia, so they were both out of it when they died.
Mm-hmm.
But I was with them both at the end. I was, my grandmother, my grandmother was living in my mother's house, and then my mother was in a facility, and I visited them both as the progression was happening. So there was nothing that hadn't been said to them when they still had their minds.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, nothing, because when they were good, I was telling them everything I cared about them. And then when they weren't good, I was still telling them everything I cared about them. And hopefully there was some recognition in their memory about it.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I loved them both.
Alan, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I enjoyed listening to the life advice, just hearing you and your relationships with the people that you care about most. And
well, if any of this gives anybody any help in their life, then it was worth it. And give me a call and follow me. If you need any real estate, let me know.
Alan, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.